Hello, my fellow misfits, my fellow humans, my fellow fractals of divine light. Good to see you again. Welcome back to A Cult of Misfits. Of course, I'm Matt Owens, and it's good to see you again. If you're enjoying the content, if you're thirsty for more, you're in luck because A Cult of Misfits is on Instagram and Twitter, aka X. I've got more content on those platforms. I post on my stories fairly regularly on Instagram. I've been sort of taking breaks on and off again, as one does for one's own mental health. So feel free to follow me on those platforms. And if you're enjoying the podcast, you can listen to me on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and, just all of the places, okay? I'm trying to get myself to a place where I can monetize this bad boy, where I can monetize on Spotify and YouTube specifically. So if you're listening to this on one of those platforms and you're enjoying the shit that I'm pumping out here, I would greatly appreciate it if you could follow me on those platforms and help get those numbers up, get those dollar bills rolling in, support me in that way, sharing it. You get the idea, guys. Thank you for your support. Love you. Today, before I record the podcast, of course, I go on these walks in the woods, and I have my little favorite secret spot that I go to that's by a nearby lake here. I had an interesting / awkward encounter with somebody a few days ago at my secret spot on the lake. So if you're interested in hearing about that, you can check out my previous episode, my previous transmission, and laugh along at the awkwardness. So today I found this little spot in the woods at this park. So I'm crossing my fingers that there aren't any disruptions here, in case you can hear the beautiful woodland creatures chirping in the background. It's real peaceful and tranquil. I often try to find these spots to go. I tuck myself away to get away from other human beings for solitude, but also just for recording purposes to have, quiet. Like the last episode, I recorded it in my car. I found a little nice spot away from everybody, and inevitably the universe has a way of throwing a wrench into that for purposes of growth. I was recording the podcast, the last one, and sure enough, I get some yahoo that walks up to my car, and he's standing about 10 feet away, and he decides that's the perfect location to have a very loud conversation on his speakerphone, on his iPhone. And so he's having this very loud conversation right next to my car, and I'm glaring at him as hard as I can, trying to show him with the anger behind my eyes to get the fuck away from my car. And he sees me, of course, and doesn't care and continues this very loud conversation in the background. And much to my fury, these are the opportunities that the universe gives me to cultivate peace, guys, to try to learn to go with the flow. And so anytime there's these disruptions in my life, whether it's the loud Hanyak having a conversation next to me, or a screaming child in the background, or what have you, they're just opportunities to learn to let it go. So I found this little peaceful place in the woods, but the way things go around here, I'm sure somebody's going to wander back here and fire up a weed whacker or a lawnmower, or a mountain lion is going to come and introduce itself to Chi-Chi. So we'll see how things go. So far, it's nice and peaceful, but I'm sure the universe will give me an opportunity to go with the flow here. So if you didn't check out my last episode, I talked about facing fears around sobriety. I've often dealt with struggles and challenges around sobriety and finding balance. And so this episode, this transmission, is going to be sort of a continuation of that, because it's been on my mind, and those are the things that I talk about. So I'm going to be talking about cultivating balance in our lives, and specifically how I'm cultivating balance in my life, or trying to anyhow. So we'll dive into that. But first I want to talk about Instagram. I was on Instagram today. A few days ago, an ex-girlfriend just randomly popped into my head, and I thought, like, well, I wonder what she's up to lately. So as one does, I looked her up on Instagram, and that's that. I was just curious what she's up to. It was a girlfriend from, back in the day in my early 20s, and it's so weird, seeing how people age and trying not to judge as we look at these people that have come into our lives and out of our lives. And I find it interesting that how the algorithms work, because I looked up this fine young lady, and today I was on Instagram, and Instagram suggests people that you may want to friend or stalk, as it were, whatever your motives are, guys. These people on Instagram, suggestions. And so in my suggestions were 3 ladies that I had previously dated. One from high school and a couple others from my early 20s. And I was like, how the hell does Instagram know who I dated? It knows that I looked up an old one a few days ago, but the algorithms, guys, I start to question whether or not, like, if it's reading my mind, or if my mind is controlling Instagram, or, this reality, this matrix, guys. Things are weird. I don't know how Instagram knew who I dated. I hadn't talked about it. It just popped into my head. So I found that weird. We're talking about cultivating balance in this episode, and I've been really thinking about going on team flip phone, kind of going off the deep end and just going on a flip phone, getting rid of my smartphone. But there's alternatives. There's like a light phone, or these dumbed down smartphones, that only have 4 or 5 features where you can just, text or make phone calls, or that's about it, right? And so I'm trying to just sort of find balance, right? As we all are, I'm sure. And the truth is, I find several features on my iPhone useful, such as notes. I take notes a lot about just things I'm thinking about, or things I want to research or look into, or potential guests I want to have on the podcast at some point, etc. And so I find notes very useful. I also like to have my maps, my directions, and weather, and who cares? But there's just a few core things that I enjoy, and if I get a flip phone, I can't necessarily do all those things. So just kind of playing with the idea of having a dumbed down version that strips away all of the social media and the YouTubes and things of that nature. So I'm sort of playing around with that. But I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I'm just trying to find balance in it. I take these breaks from Instagram or Twitter or YouTube or whatever, right? Because I tend to get real obsessive and just endlessly scrolling and get into those cycles and patterns. And that's what this conversation is about trying to, not necessarily perhaps breaking free from those patterns and cycles, but maybe just finding balance in them. And so that's kind of what I want to dive into today. In the last episode, I talked about sobriety and just trying to become the best version of myself that I possibly can, right? And dropping these masks and facades that we have. This is officially the second podcast episode that I've ever recorded where I'm sober, no drugs or alcohol. And that, of course, made me very nervous. And anytime things make me nervous that I'm scared of, I have been running towards them lately. And so if it scares me to record a podcast sober, well, guess what? That's exactly what I'm going to do, because I'm going to keep doing that until it no longer makes me scared. That's sort of my modus operandi, and it's sort of my path to freedom, my path to liberation from these things, whether it's societal pressures or a substance, or my own mental games that I play, or stories that I tell myself, or limiting beliefs. Guys, I'm already kind of getting emotional, so I'm feeling like this is going to be a good one. Oftentimes I use these substances or Instagram even as a crutch, right? Oftentimes I don't want to sit with my own thoughts or sit by myself quietly. I often feel the need to pick up my phone, or pick up the joint or pick up the bottle of whiskey or whatever, right? And so these last several years I've really been practicing and cultivating this idea of just sitting with it. Sitting with the uncomfortability, sitting with the awkwardness, sitting with these things that make me uncomfortable, pushing myself intentionally outside of my comfort zone for purposes of growth, right? So I've really been questioning specifically coffee and caffeine, smoking weed, and drinking alcohol. They've always sort of been a part of my life. I've always been using one or all of the above at any given time, and recognizing that they're often a crutch for myself, right? I tell myself these limiting beliefs, these stories, such as I need to have coffee to function in the morning. I need to have weed to be creative. I need to drink myself into an oblivion so that I can sleep at night. I need to take these over-the-counter sleeping pills in order to sleep at night, right? I tell myself these stories, and I've really been scrutinizing these and bringing them into the light is what I'm doing, and analyzing them, and really having an honest conversation with myself about them. And asking myself if I can do without them, right? And of course the answer is yes. I know that deep down I can. What I've been doing these last few years is really challenging myself. I enjoy / dread these challenges because they're ultimately extremely fucking difficult and scary and challenging and, agonizing oftentimes, right? And but I found that as I push through these things, as I challenge myself, that I show to myself that I'm capable of doing anything, that this is my path to being limitless. This is my path to being fearless, right? And so it's just like taking an ice bath or, something like that, where you plunge yourself into the ice bath just to sort of show yourself that you can do it, to sort of rejigger things, to shake things up, to shock the system outside of its comfort zone, right? And so that's why I do these things. Taking a break from caffeine. I've stopped drinking caffeine and coffee for a few weeks or a month or a couple months, and just to show myself that I can do it. And not beating myself up when I eventually go back to coffee and say, you know what, okay, I know that I can do it. Good for me, pat on the back, gold star, I can do anything. And not getting myself into the habit of saying, you piece of shit, why are you going back to coffee? We were doing so good. Or weed, or alcohol, or whatever it is. Sugar is another one, right? And so I do these things to show myself that I'm capable of doing anything, right? And the last year or so, I stopped drinking alcohol. I continued to smoke weed, but just as a challenge, like I said, to see, can I do it? Alcoholism runs in my family. As I said in the last episode, I talked about my mom. I don't think she would mind me sharing this, that she has struggled with substances essentially her entire life and has recently gone sober. And so good for her. She's been an inspiration to me and others in the family to show that, if she can do it, any of us can do it. And so I'm very proud of her. And it's good to see that, right? To as a form of encouragement for myself and for others. So I stopped drinking for about a year, and then maybe 6 months ago, I sort of picked it up again just to play around with it and say, can I bring this back into my life? Am I going to go off the deep end? How do I feel? And initially, of course, I loved it. It was like reuniting with an old friend, and I was like, "Oh, baby, I missed you." And I love the bourbon. I love. There aren't many alcohols I don't love, right? I love. Obviously, being drunk is quite fun when you're in it. But especially as I get older, there are physical effects and mental effects that happen after the fact. And I started discovering, I got my notepad out, my mental notepad out, and I'm asking myself and analyzing, how do I feel the next day? How do I feel during? How do I feel after? And the truth is, I slipped into it real easily and started drinking. I wouldn't say heavily. There are times in my past that I was drinking, I would say heavily, back in my restaurant days, where there was that culture of just drugs and alcohol. And after a long shift of working at the restaurant, you go out with everybody and you just drink yourself silly. And had a lot of great times and a lot of great memories. And there was a time and a place for that. But I slipped into it real easily and found myself drinking, for me, a little too much, right? Not to the point of blacking out every night like I used to back in the day, but just I wasn't necessarily comfortable with it. And I found that I was gaining a lot of weight, and it's not, trying to have a good body and look good. It wasn't about that ego stuff, which of course I've also struggled with in the past with body image issues. And, feeling like I'm ugly or too fat or not good enough, etc. And so I just noted that I was gaining weight and I was just feeling kind of gross. That's all it was. And not looking my best, not feeling my best. And I'm kind of in this place now where I want to, become the best version of myself. And when I'm drinking like that, and my body is kind of chugging along and kind of dragging because I'm drinking every night, I didn't like that. I found that I was having a great time when I was drinking. It was extremely fun, of course. But then the next morning I was waking up extremely irritable, extremely groggy, extremely just in a bad mood, right? Every single morning, bad mood, bad mood, bad mood. And I'm like, okay, well, I know what's causing that. So I took a break from it, stopped the drinking, right? But I'm still smoking weed. And so I thought, you can listen to this in the last episode. I go into it in more detail, but I'm just sort of brushing over it here. If you're interested, check it out. But I thought, I've never really been completely sober from all substances. I've always struggled sleeping at night, but that's probably because my body is, so jacked up from, drinking coffee, chugging coffee every morning, drinking a whole freaking pot of coffee every morning, and then crashing my body at night with weed or alcohol or whatever. And so I'm really about cultivating, I know that when I'm eating super clean and intermittent fasting and not drinking as much, not smoking weed as much, that I feel real good. My mood is fantastic, and it's repeatable. I know that when I regularly do it, I'm regularly in a good mood. It's not to say I'm never in a bad mood or never irritable, but it largely goes away, and I know why, right? So also this idea of getting away from, the last month and a half or so, I haven't been smoking weed. And as I've just said, I sort of eliminated drinking it too, as just sort of a way to show myself, can I do this? And the answer is yes, I am doing it. But I've also been, taking just over-the-counter sleeping pills just to sort of, it's been rough sleeping because my body is used to crashing every night. And so I'm just sort of using these over-the-counter pills just to sort of, help me to somewhat sleep at night. And I've been completely sober for just over a week or so. I'm not one of those people that counts days because I just have a terrible memory and I honestly can't remember how long it's been, but it's just been over a week. And my sleeping has been real terrible. I've been really struggling and waking up every couple of hours, and I'm just, by the time the sun rises and the birds are chirping, I'm pissed off because I just haven't been sleeping, and I'm irritable because of that, and it's just been a struggle. But of course I know that I've been through these struggles before, these challenges that I put myself through, and I know that there's a period of going through the fire, and this is just part of the process, so suck it up, buddy, it's going to get better. And I'm here to report that it is getting better. Last night was the first night that I thought, I'm just going to go cold. I'm going to, of course, I'm not smoking or drinking, but I'm going to just see what happens if I don't take the sleeping pills, because I think the sleeping pills are kind of fucking me up. I don't like the idea of putting these, pharmaceutical chemicals in my body. I've sort of been straying away from that. I used to be one of those people who every time I have a sniffle, a cold or a flu or anything, I just start chugging the NyQuil or the, whatever pharmaceutical is on the cold and flu aisle. And I just feel disgusting afterwards. So I'm just trying to find a more homeopathic or naturopathic way to have my body heal itself. And so I thought, if I don't need weed or alcohol to sleep, then of course I don't need these over-the-counter pills to sleep either. And so I'm just going to play with the idea. And last night, for the first time in like 10 days or whatever, I actually slept like a baby. And so that is encouraging, right? That I don't need these pills or substances or weed or alcohol or whatever to sleep. So that's encouraging, right? But I've been thinking a lot about it because it's just right on the forefront of what I'm going through right now. And I question everything. I was just recently kind of grilling my mom about, just not grilling is the wrong word, but just picking her brain and asking why she does what she does and because she's given up smoking cigarettes and she's given up alcohol and whatever else. But I asked her about coffee. I said, "Are you still drinking coffee?" And she said, "Yes, I still have a cup or two in the morning." And no judgment, of course. But I start thinking about these people who go to AA or Narcotics Anonymous or whatever. And oftentimes I find that these alcoholics will give up alcohol, but they'll still continue smoking cigarettes, for example, or drinking coffee, for example, or these heroin addicts will give up heroin, but they'll still smoke cigarettes or whatever, right? They still sort of have a vice that they rely on, but the main problem was heroin or the main problem was alcohol, so they gave that up, but they still kind of rely on some sort of a vice. And so I'm questioning where to draw the line with that in my own life, because it seems a little hardcore to me to give up drinking and smoking weed and caffeine. What then? Do I give up sugar? Do I give up carbs? Do I give up, there's lots of things that I consume that are not healthy for me, right? Social media. Do I give up social media forever? Do I give up sugar forever? Do I give up smoking forever? And of course, it's an individual question. It's different for everybody, and there's no right or wrong. This is just me talking it out and working through it for myself. But I don't know. To be honest, I had some coffee this morning. Initially, I wanted to go hardcore. I wanted to go straight edge, hardcore, no caffeine, no weed, no drinking. Because the caffeine was giving me the shakes. I was kind of having a tightness in my chest, shortness of breath. I was my teeth were chattering. It was just I'm obviously drinking too much coffee. And so I thought that's it. No more coffee, that's it. But every time I do that in my life, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel balanced. I realized what I was doing is I was drinking these soda can sized, 10 ounce, 12 ounce or whatever, soda can size cans of cold brew coffee, nitro cold brew or whatever, right? Because I loved it. I love coffee, guys. Love me some coffee. I'm in the Seattle area, so it's just sort of it's a thing here, guys. I love my coffee. And I was how come this one can of coffee is just getting me so jacked up? My nervous system was getting so jacked with this coffee. And it occurred to me to check the caffeine content in this 10-ounce can of coffee. And I realized, because I'm drinking one can, I'm thinking that's equivalent to one cup of coffee, right? But my body is not reacting that way. So what I realized was this little can of coffee contains over 300 milligrams of caffeine, which is equivalent to, the average cup of coffee is around 90 to 100 milligrams of caffeine, for those of you that don't know. I didn't know. I had to look it up. And so I didn't realize that this one little innocent can of nitro cold brew was the equivalent of over 3 cups of coffee. That's why I was so fucking jacked up all the time. So today, for example, I just had 1 cup of coffee, and I feel great. I enjoy the buzz. I enjoy the mental acuity that it gives me. I enjoy the taste. I enjoy the flavor. I fucking love coffee. And so I'm learning that I can find balance in that I don't have to have 300 or 400 milligrams of coffee every day in order to function. And often there are days where I don't feel like having coffee. And it's about learning to listen to my body, right? Learning to just say, you know what, it doesn't feel right today, and maybe I can skip it today. And then guess what? I feel better on those days that I listen to my body. The days that I ignore my body and continue to chug the coffee are the days that I feel like shit, right? I haven't smoked weed in the last month and a half or whatever, but if you listen to the last episode, I talk about how I smoked weed like a week and a half ago or whatever, and I felt like shit. And part of the reason why I felt like shit, I felt paranoid and stressed out and anxious, and it was just like it was a bad trip. It was a bad situation smoking the weed, and part of the reason for that was because I wasn't feeling it. I was feeling kind of like I was spiraling. I was feeling stressed out. I was feeling anxious, and I tried to fix those feelings by smoking weed, and then of course it turned into a terrible experience, right? It's about set and setting or whatever, like when you're taking psychedelics, if you're in a chaotic, crazy environment, or you're mentally in a bad place and you take psychedelics, you're going to have a bad trip. If you are peaceful and it feels right and you're with friends or you're in the woods or whatever, and it just feels like you're like it just feels right, and you take psychedelics, you're going to have a great trip. So same with caffeine, same with alcohol, same with all of these things. And so I'm just always kind of playing around with it, right? Because at some point I just want to recognize that we're all humans, right? And we're here in this physical realm, this physical experience, to a large degree, to experience life in the 3D. And part of that includes doing drugs and smoking alcohol and, experiencing and playing with these vices that we often have. And for many of us, like myself, that's often a challenge of finding that balance, finding our way down that path, right? And there is no right and wrong, of course, but at some point I have to, I shouldn't say have to, I'm trying to cultivate this idea of, not beating myself up, because a lot of this is just a mental game, right? A lot of it is just that voice in my head, the adversary, as I call it, or Hal or whatever, that is constantly telling me I'm a piece of shit for going back to smoking again. I'm a piece of shit for drinking again. I fell off the wagon. How could we do this? We have no self-control, and just a spiral of self-pity, and I don't want to go into that, right? I don't want to go into those spiraling patterns, because most of my life I've lived in that pattern and cycle, and it's awful. And so the Buddhists and Eastern philosophies, etc., Hinduism or whatever, they all talk about releasing attachment to these things of the physical realm, and that's the way to find enlightenment, whatever that means. Because ultimately, when we attach to things in this world, whether it's a substance or attachment to caring what people think about us, or trying to get other people to love us, or, these things that we attach to, whatever, ultimately these attachments lead to suffering. And I agree with that. I see that there's a lot of wisdom in that. When we attach ourselves to outcomes or attach ourselves to whatever, right? It often, almost always, I would say, leads to suffering, right? Mental suffering, physical suffering, etc. And it's not until, according to them, it's not until we release our attachment to these things that we can truly find freedom. And I'm always trying to seek more freedom in my life. That's my modus operandi. That's my main game, is trying to just find more freedom in my life. Freedom from other people's judgment, freedom from my own the voices in my head, the adversary, freedom from this programming, as my friend Nathan likes to say, the algorithms, right? These algorithms that we get into, these cycles, these patterns. And I have found from my own experience in exploring these things, that there is there's a large amount of freedom that can be found from releasing oneself from these things. And there is a large, tremendous reduction in suffering in my own life when I do release attachment to these things. And so I'm always playing this game of like, how much do I have to release? Where is that line, right? Like, how hardcore do I have to go on this thing? I feel like there's a lot of social pressure. Perhaps it's just my own interpretation, right? But I feel like there's a lot of social pressure to become sober, right? Like I'll use my mom as an example, right? Everybody in the family fully understands that she has struggled with. Usually I use my own examples, but I don't mean to pick on her at all. But it's just a good example, and I don't think she would mind, because I'm not throwing shade here. I'm just using this example, but. Everybody in the family sort of understood that she struggled with these sorts of things. And anytime she got back on the wagon and wasn't drinking for periods or wasn't smoking cigarettes for periods, everybody in the family, myself included, would applaud her and say, good job, good for you, you're doing great, like you finally got your shit together, right? Like there's a lot of judgment there too, right? From family members, etc., that judge you and judge your actions, and judge whether or not you're on the wagon or off the wagon or have your shit together according to who? According to them and their beliefs and their, ideals and etc. So, they would applaud her and say, good job for kicking the habit. Like, we're so proud of you. And then anytime, inevitably, she's currently sober, but, and has been for about a year. So anytime she would, fall off the wagon and start drinking again or smoking again or whatever it was, there was always a sense of like disappointment from everybody in the family. Like, oh, dang, that's too bad that she couldn't keep it up. She couldn't, maybe next time, maybe she'll get her shit together at some point again, right? Like judgment. And so I feel like, for myself, I'm sure she would agree if I asked her, that there's just this kind of this overwhelming pressure to perform for society or perform for family, to show like, hey, look at me, I'm sober, everybody, I finally got my shit together, I'm finally on the wagon, like, like I'm finally on the good path. And there's so much pressure behind that, right? Like right now, I sort of feel, I've sort of, the last several years, I've sort of worked through trying to perform for people and trying to get acceptance from my dad, acceptance from my mom or family members or society or whatever, trying to gain acceptance from them. And I feel like I've let go of most of that. But if I'm just being honest, talking through this, that there's a hint of letting people down, of making a big announcement like I did in the last episode, right? I make these big grand announcements. I'm sober. I'm never drinking again. I'm never smoking weed again. But then there's always the fear that like, oh shit, if I ever smoke again or ever decide, God forbid, that I have a sip of whiskey, that I'm going to get an onslaught of judgment from my family or people on social media or whoever, it doesn't matter, judging me like, oh, whoa, buddy, I thought you said you were sober. Like, why are you drinking whiskey again? Or why are you smoking weed again? Or I thought you weren't drinking coffee anymore. Like, what's up, bud? Like, you got to get back on that train again, man. And I'm just sort of playing with the idea of not giving a shit what other people think about me or my path or my journey or what I'm doing or not doing, right? And playing with the idea of, because it's a real fickle thing here. It's a real fine line of finding that balance, right? Of cultivating that balance of, can I smoke weed or can I drink or whatever it is sometimes, right? To not let these substances or social media or whatever control me. Rather, can I find control? I don't like to use the word control, but can I not let it control me, right? Can I break free from that dynamic, that relationship, right? Because ultimately weed or alcohol or social media are not inherently bad, right? It's my reaction and my interaction and relationship with these things that sort of tends to spiral out of control or become imbalanced, etc., right? Because a lot of this, I realize, the ancients, I just like to use that broad term, the ancients will talk about how, and philosophers talk about how everything is of the mind. And I talk about this reality, I believe, is just a product of our mind. That's for a different topic that I talk about frequently. But a lot of this... a lot of this is just a game of the mind, right? And trying to not get into that place of beating myself up. And can I find that balance? Because, I see these, like, for example, the old woman, like the 100-year-old woman, it's her 100th birthday and she's on the news, the local news. Like, guys, who's watching the local news anymore? Like, no judgment, but like, who the fuck is watching the local news anymore? But you know what I'm saying? Like, they interview the 100-year-old woman and they ask her secret. What are your secrets to longevity? What are your secrets to living a happy and fulfilled life? And, there's these old women who are like, she's been smoking. She's still a chain smoker. She's like, I enjoy my cigarettes and I enjoy my whiskey. And that's why I'm so fucking happy. Right? Like, I just do whatever the fuck I want and everybody else can fuck off. And that's the secret to happiness. And I really take that to heart because that's the life I want to lead, right? I want to just do whatever the fuck I want because there's freedom in that, right? Women like that or people like that or whatever. I've always admired people like that who just do whatever the fuck they want, whether they've cultivated that or worked at it or that's just sort of who they are at the core of who they are. I really admire that, right? Because their mental game is where I want to be. I want to be at a place where it's like, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to stress about it, right? Friend of the show, friend of the cult, Debbie. Shout out to Debbie. How's it going? I don't know if she wants to be labeled as friend of the cult, but it's there. I've said it. Friend of the cult, Debbie, recently sent me a podcast. She sends me just the best content. She sends me good stuff to listen to. And it was a podcast about GHK and GNM, which I've never heard of them before, but GHK stands for Germanic Healing Knowledge, and GNM, which stands for Germanic New Medicine. It's the same thing, essentially. But basically what it talks about, I'll just give you my breakdown of it, is... everything is of the mind, right? It was talking about the body being able to heal itself, right? Which I'm a proponent of now. I didn't used to be. I always was a big fan of pharmaceuticals, right? Because that's just sort of what the programming told me is you listen to your doctor, you listen to what the science says, you just take the pills, you take the medicine, and it's better than letting your own body heal itself, right? I always thought that those kooky hippies, what do they know, right? Like, I'm not going to take St. John's wort. No, thank you. I just want to take some pills. I want it to actually help me, right? But of course, recognizing that these are just masking things, masking symptoms, putting a Band-Aid on something and not getting to the root core of it. And so this concept of GHK or GNM talks about how it's all in the mind and how diseases and viruses and even cancer, to go to the extreme, is a result of what they call conflict shock, which is essentially trauma, right? The doctor or whatever discovered this in the 70s and was talking about how his son had died, and immediately after that he got testicular cancer. And he realized that there's probably a correlation between the two, that this trauma of losing his son somehow caused testicular cancer, etc. So that these conflict shocks, these traumas in our life, these stresses, these anxieties, these products of the mind, right, are what ultimately cause dis-ease or disease or getting sick with viruses, right? There's a component of fear to it as well that's talked about, that I also believe that, people who are constantly, I was one of these people, right, just constantly worried about getting sick, right? If somebody had a cough or the flu or something, I was petrified. I don't want to get sick. Stay away from me. Like not wanting to touch door handles and always sanitizing my hands with hand sanitizer. And of course, that's killing the natural bacteria and shit that live on our hands that help us be healthy. And, just always afraid that I'm going to get sick, afraid I'm going to get cancer, right? I don't want to eat too much sugar because then I'm going to start getting sick, right? I got to take my vitamins or I'm going to get sick again. Or just these fears that we have, right? Fear of, I got to exercise, otherwise I'm going to fucking die. That's fear-induced. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with exercise. Of course, I am a proponent of exercise. But if your intention is to do it because you're scared to death of fucking dying, then your body ultimately is not going to get to that healthy point, from my perspective and from this GNM perspective, right? Several years ago, this was sort of before I got divorced. I didn't know it at the time, of course, but the marriage was shaky and I was dealing with a lot of stress in my life and trying to find myself and trying to just, I was kind of discovering and playing with spirituality and, crystals and incense and all the hippie shit. And so I started having, out of the blue for the first time in my life, all of these gut issues, all of these foods that I had previously enjoyed, and all of a sudden they were really fucking up my gut and giving me this pain and etc. A leaky gut type of a situation, right? And so I was going to all these doctors and they were all telling me that no, nothing's wrong with you. All the tests say you're fine. And I'm like, well, I'm not fucking fine because I can't eat all these foods. And I started going vegan and going really hardcore. And at the darkest place, I was only eating boiled chicken breast and broccoli and carrots because that was the only shit that my body could function with. And I was like, this is not a way to live my life. I don't want to live my life. I'm completely miserable. I'm not enjoying the foods I previously enjoyed. And I'm all about balance, but like everything I ate was fucking hurting me. And now looking back, I'm at a place where I have healed much of that trauma. I've done the inner work. I've done the inner journey. I've sort of dealt with the mental aspects of it and worked through a lot of the deep-seated traumas, even childhood shit or whatever, and gotten to the root of that and began to heal a lot of that. And now today, many years later, I can eat whatever I want. All of those foods previously that had fucked my stomach up were no longer hurting me. And now when I start looking at this GNM, this Germanic New Medicine stuff, that's what they talk about. They talk about healing those traumas, and then the body can then begin to heal itself once the emotional trauma and the mental trauma is dealt with. And so I find that very interesting, right? That a lot of it is just this mental stuff and emotional stuff, not just dealing with the mind, but also dealing with the heart and spirit, and working all three in conjunction with each other and getting them, harmonious. And once that harmony can be achieved, not that I'm at the top of the mountain here, it's always constant work, right? Always the student, always working the path and finding the way. But that's where I'm at, is trying to decide where that balance is, right? And if I can allow myself to drink once in a while, if I can allow myself to smoke once in a while and not have it become a crutch, right? Not to rely on it and say, I need this to function. I need this to sleep, right? The last week, I've really been struggling with sleep, as I said, but I've also been struggling with creativity because my previous habit, my previous pattern was to take these walks in the woods. I would get excited for it, right? I'd look forward to it. I would go on these walks. I'd smoke some weed. I find that the weed just really helps my creativity. For those of you that don't smoke, it's it really helps my creativity. It opens up my mind in ways that I have previously not experienced when I'm sober. It opens up my mind. The creative ideas start flowing. It improves my mood. I'm in a good mood. I'm jazzed up. I want to talk about spiritual stuff. I get really excited to talk about this stuff for the podcast. I start taking notes and I get really jazzed up about it. And it's just part of my process. And I found that when I smoke, all day long, when I sort of wake and bake, when I smoke first thing in the morning and just sort of smoke all day long and then smoke at night, my body sort of starts to shut down and I feel like shit. And so I found that the balance in smoking weed is, for myself, is that, I'm going to smoke in the afternoon when I take a walk and just sort of prepare for the podcast, let the ideas flow, take notes, gather my thoughts, and then smoke in the evening just for sleeping purposes, right? And that balance worked for me. I found that when I don't smoke all day, I kind of feel good, right? And there are times when I smoke a little too much every single afternoon, and I need to take a break, right? Just to get a little biblical here, there's the idea that, God rested on the seventh day. This idea of the Sabbath. Taking a day of rest, not just for gratitude and reverence for God and to sort of have some inner peace and to take a break from the daily grind sort of a thing, but just to find balance, right? God didn't say to take a break every fucking day, otherwise you're a bad person, because that's what the adversary says. That's what the voice in my head tells me. If you don't quit drinking, you're a piece of shit, right? God doesn't say that. God says to take a break once a week, right? Or this idea of sober October, right? Just taking a month off, taking a break, right? That there's balance in that. So I'm questioning alcohol. Like I said, alcohol, I've taken a year off from it, and it does make me feel like shit afterwards. I gain weight, etc., and it affects my mood. So theoretically, I know that I can give it up, and I'm okay with giving it up. I don't feel pressured, or I don't feel the voice in my head telling me to do it. Because anytime the voice in my head or society or my family or whatever, if I feel that they're telling me to do something, I'm going to do the opposite. That's just how I roll. Very contrary by nature. Like, don't fucking tell me what to do. So I have to get myself to a place where I'm ready to give it up, right? In my own time, in my own place. And so I feel like I'm at a place where I'm ready to give up the alcohol because it just doesn't serve me in a way that it did. I often would drink to cover social anxiety or stress. When I would go to a party, I always kind of had to be drunk because I don't like being around people. I don't like parties. And I sort of had to work through all of that trauma or conflict shock, as the Germans say it or whatever. And so I've sort of dealt with that, and I've learned about myself more, and I'm more comfortable not going to parties, or sometimes I do like to go to parties. Sometimes I do like to be social, and I don't feel the need to put on that mask of drunkenness or being stoned out of my mind to just get through this party or get through this family holiday gathering, right? And so now I just kind of do whatever the fuck I want. I don't feel the need to drink because, like, if I don't want to go to the party, I'm not going to go to the party. I don't care. I'm not going to feel guilted into it or anything. And I had to get myself to that place. So anyways, I'm at a place where I'm okay letting go of drinking. But now I'm questioning caffeine, right? And like I said, I feel like I'm okay with having 1 cup of coffee. I feel like it doesn't put me over the edge. My body is kind of okay with having 1 cup of coffee. Some days I can, some days I can't, right? And so now the big question is weed, marijuana. Marijuana, my old friend. Can I give it up? Yes, of course. I can do anything. I know that. But do I want to give it up, right? Because not only does it give me open up those channels of creativity, but it also, there's a spiritual aspect to it too, where oftentimes when I want to connect with the divine, I will smoke some weed and I have these emotional connections that I don't necessarily have when I'm sober, right? I have this connection, this divine connection, and it's often really intense. Or if I'm working through some shit, I'll fire up a joint. And it's extremely beneficial and useful for spiritual purposes. Same with psychedelics, right? Which I don't take very often. In fact, it's been years. But anyway, so there is a spiritual component to it. But then I question, like, do I need weed in order to connect to the divine? Of course, the answer is no. It's like, do I need a priest to connect to God? No, of course not. Well, that's just my beliefs, of course, right? But so I'm questioning do I need that? Are there other avenues? Can I be sober and still connect to the divine in that intense way? And the answer is yes. And frankly, I haven't explored that fully because I've always been stoned. And so that's what I'm playing around with now is I don't, anytime I feel pressured to quit or I feel imbalanced, it's always a real nail biter, right? I'm always like, okay, I'm going to take a month off. I'll do a sober October situation. And then I'm like, okay, only 29 more days, 28 more days. You got this, buddy. 27 more days, 26, holy shit, 26 more days. Like I can do this. And it's real stressful and real scary and real challenging, but I do it, of course. And then as soon as the month is over, I'm like, I wipe my brow and I'm like, phew, did that. And I can go back to smoking again. Right. And so I'm at a place now where I don't honestly feel like drinking at all. If somebody offered me a drink right now, I don't feel the need to drink. I'm not white knuckling it like I have in the past. So that's good. And the last year when I quit drinking, I honestly didn't miss it. So that's good. And if somebody offered me a joint right now, I don't honestly feel like one. I feel like this podcast is going quite well. Thank you very much. And I'm sober, and that scared me. So I know that I can do a podcast sober, and it's not going to be a shitty podcast or whatever the adversary in my voice says to me. So I got that down, but so I'm just sort of playing with the idea of sobriety. I think for now I'm going to give up alcohol, and it's not to say I'll never have another drink again. And if people judge me for that, that's fine. That's on them. That's not my problem. But I feel good being sober because it doesn't really serve me in a good way. And I know that it's really easy to slip back into it. So now I'm talking about weed, and I'm just sort of playing with it. I'm not going to put a time limit on it. Like, we're going to not smoke for 30 days. We're not going to smoke for 2 months. We're going to take a year. I'm like, none of that, because that gets me into a bad, unhealthy pattern as well, where I just put limits on stuff. And anytime I feel like I'm putting a limit on myself, then I rebel. And I just am getting to a place where I want to be free from all of that. So I feel like if and when the time comes that I want to explore smoking again, maybe I will, and maybe I won't. And I'm okay with that either way, because that's what this life is about, right? At the end of the day, I don't want to beat myself up. I just want to be like the 100-year-old woman that just says, you know what? I did whatever the fuck I wanted. Sometimes I was balanced, sometimes I wasn't, but like, cheers. Right. So I lift up my proverbial glass and I say, cheers to you. Cheers to this journey. Cheers to being a fucking human. It's definitely not meant to be easy. There's definitely meant to be suffering as a component of this. That's why I think weed was invented. So thanks to the good Lord for inventing weed. Thanks for these quote unquote medicines to help us through this wacky reality that we're living through. Go easy on yourself. Yeah, that brings me to tears. Go easy on yourself. Take it easy. Take a break. This place is hard. This place is challenging. This place is beautiful. So cheers to us. Love you. End transmission.